Welcome to Blueprint for Health and Healing, reversing disease from its foundation. Today's topic is cancer. Is there hope? I was watching a baker make a cake. I've always enjoyed cooking. I used to make bread. He invited me, so I thought, well, that would be interesting. It was a commercial bakery, and he started out with a big mixing bowl, and he put in 1 gallon of eggs. I'm thinking, that's a lot of eggs. Then he put in 1 gallon of oil. It was carrot cake. I was of the impression, at least before this event, that carrot cake might have some nutritional properties that would be good for you. I mean, after all, it had carrots in it. Then he added a gallon of sugar. And then came a gallon of flour, and I was thinking there must be about 10 more of those gallons of flour, but no, that was all the flour there was. I'm thinking this thing isn't even 50% flour. Then came a few nuts and, the other ingredients, and some carrots, not a lot, and he put it in a big pan and put it in the oven. I was feeling a bit shocked. All those times I might have eaten carrot cake before I quit eating that kind of stuff anyway. and how awfully unhealthy it might be. Well, then he headed to make his cream cheese frosting. Oh, and it had vanilla in it. Oh, not just the run-of-the-mill vanilla. He'd been to South America. He'd found the best vanilla on the planet. Oh, was he proud of that vanilla. He said he had the best vanilla in town. And so vanilla and cream cheese and sugar and mix it up, and then he got the cake out of the oven eventually, and wow, that was fascinating. And a couple years later I came through town after I'd left that area, and I saw his picture in the paper. Oh, there he is. But his picture said they were honoring him. I'm thinking, they honoring the baker? And they were honoring him because he had passed away. I was shocked. He wasn't that old. I saw one of the physicians around town, and I said, what happened to the baker? They said, well, he died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I'm thinking, whoa, that's scary. And then I was called to remember the making of the cake. And I'm thinking, wow, now that I've studied this so thoroughly, there was everything in that cake he needed to get non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The viruses live in dairy products. The sugar wipes out the immune system. Eating junk food and having a lot of baking soda will wipe out the B vitamins. And yes, people eating more of these products do have more non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. In the year 1900, only 5% of death certificates listed cancer as a cause of death. Today, cancer has surpassed heart disease as the #1 cause of death for Americans under the age of 85. How have we come so far? What are we doing different? What has creeped up on us? And shouldn't we get back to doing what they were doing in 1900, which was, well, there was no processed food, no GMO, very few chemicals. Everybody lived out on a farm and worked hard. We could talk about all the special things that people used to do that made them healthy. I spent a while as the medical director of a lifestyle center that treated largely cancer. And got a lot of experience there that I hope will be valuable as we continue to talk here about cancer. Now, our goal is to better understand lifestyle factors that lead to cancer and how best to cancer-proof yourself. You want to be cancer-proof? Well, and so we're going to talk about diet, we're going to talk about lifestyle, we're going to talk about toxins, and we'll consider the mind-body connection. And so watch as we go through those particular topics. Now, let's start with diet. And let's start with the things that are, that the studies show are high risk. Things that will give you cancer. Things that if you eat them, you're kidding yourself that you're going to avoid cancer. For example, red meat and dairy will double your risk of metastatic prostate cancer. Metastatic. Not every man has metastatic prostate cancer. And you don't want it. It goes to your bones. It causes pain. It can cause bones to break. It's bad news. And we'll get into why these products would do this. I'm not just going to say they do and leave you there. You're going to learn the mechanism. And part of the mechanism has to do with the fact that meat has something everybody thinks they want. If I go into a crowd and tell them I'm going to become a vegetarian, what do you think they're going to ask? Where you're going to get your protein. But what they don't know is that a high protein diet also doubles or triples your risk of cancer. And especially animal protein. Not all protein is created equal, because if you eat the same amount of vegetable protein, the risk of cancer does not go up like that. It's a very different protein. It has a different set of amino acids. And so if we think about this, it's like a picture. So behind me I have a picture that's largely blue-green, but it's a picture. If I put up this picture, it's got red and black and green and so forth. It's a picture, but it's a total different set of colors. In protein, you have some amino acids in animal protein and a different quantity of the set in vegetable protein. And here I have a slide. It says tomatoes protect you against cancers of the mouth, esophagus, stomach, colon, rectum, and prostate. Well, that's good to know, but where am I going to get my protein? Listen to this. Nutritionists like to take 100 calories of some given food. And when they take 100 calories of some given food, they measure how many of those 100 calories come from carbohydrate, fat, protein, and so forth. And so a beef steak, 100 calories of beef steak, will be 17% or 17 calories coming from protein. How many calories or percentage of 100 calories of tomatoes do you think is protein? I get answers like 1, 2. Wrong. It's 17%. It's the same as a beef steak. It just takes a few more tomatoes to get 100 calories. But the idea that you are going to run out of protein if you eat a vegetarian diet is not supported by good laboratory scientific evidence. So protein of meat is going to increase your risk. And that said, let me just clue you in here. We said that red meat and dairy would double the risk of prostate cancer. Anytime you have a risk factor for prostate cancer, you can be sure it's also going to be a risk factor for other hormonally sensitive tumors like breast cancer. And now that's the protein. And so I sort of started off with the important thing, and that is meat is one of the biggest causes of cancer, meat eating. And I'm going to support that here with more science as we go along, but just keep that in mind as we're going here, that if you want to avoid cancer, you might want to avoid some of the causes. So that's protein. Let's talk about fat. Here's a graph where we're comparing on one side the death rate per 100,000 of breast cancer. Across the bottom we have the total dietary fat intake. So which has more fat, a beef steak or broccoli? You got it. There's no fat to speak of in broccoli. So obviously to achieve these levels of fat that we're going to talk about, you're not doing it from broccoli. You're getting it from animal products. And so grams per day. And so if we look here at all the countries, notice here we're in Canada, and we have about 160 grams of total fat per day. and a very high death rate from breast cancer. Notice also that down toward the bottom of the graph we have Japan and Thailand. But you know, those Japanese, they come and they move to, you know, Montreal or Quebec or whatever, and they start eating at the fast food joints, so they move to LA, and in a couple generations they have the same death rate from breast cancer as all the other people eating from those places. It's not that they're genetically protected against cancer. It's just the Japanese in their traditional diet have a lower fat intake. And so this is breast cancer, and so just to, you know, show you that it also affects the prostate. Saturated fat, which is animal fat, triples a man's risk of dying of prostate cancer. So fat's part of the problem, and you're patting yourself on the back, oh, I don't eat any fat from animals. I wish I could tell you it was only animals. You refine fats from vegetables, though, and you have the same thing. Processed vegetable oils quadruple your risk of breast and stomach cancer. You weren't made to run on that refined stuff. You know how many ears of corn it takes to make 1 spoon of corn oil? It's like 13. Could you eat 13 ears of corn? I couldn't. Could you eat a spoon of oil? I could eat more than 1 spoon of oil. Look at that. Look at that stir fry there. It looks all oily. There's probably a couple spoons of oil just in that. And so eating that kind of stuff, especially heating it, is going to increase your risk of cancer. Now why is that? Why does oil do this? Well, it's often oxidized and has free radicals. That doesn't help. It has no antioxidants, so it's not a part of the solution. And if you're not a part of the solution, you're probably a part of the problem. And but it's also true that your hormones in your body are fat-based. And if they're fairly, you know, by themselves, they have to act both as a carrier and as a messenger, doing what they need to do. But if they have a whole bunch of extra oil from bottles and animals and so forth, then they can just act as hormones, and they're greatly potentiated. And so oral contraceptives increase your risk of breast cancer. Hormone replacement therapy, so you won't have those hot flashes as you get older, increase your risk of endometrial, ovarian, and breast cancer. Playing with hormones, either through pills or through taking extra fat, is dangerous. Now, one of the things that sticks out in my mind is that fat cells, when you get too many of them or they get too big, actually produce hormones. And so if you get obese, your risk of dying of breast cancer goes way up, because we cannot stop the contribution of estrogens from fat cells to your cancer. But it's not just cancer of the breast, it could be cancer of the prostate, cervix, uterus, and ovary. Now there's another source of excess hormones that you'll want to know about so you can avoid it. And it has to do with animal products. And so I'm going to compare the amount of estradiol, which is one of the estrogens, which is good to have if you're a young lady and you want to become a woman and develop those secondary sexual characteristics necessary for having a child, carrying a child, feeding a child. But you don't want that as you're getting older. And so the average woman has 4 quarts of blood, or 4 liters, about the same, and about a gallon. And if her estradiol levels go over 9 units for that 4 quarts of blood, her risk of breast cancer goes off the charts. It's like 7-fold higher. So you definitely don't want to go over 9 units. But look what happens if you eat 1 chunk of cheese. 1 chunk of cheese will add 3 units to that, and you're over the charts. This is like a 33% increase in your hormones. And a tiny little change in hormones makes a big difference in what they do in your body. And so 1 chunk of butter, same idea. 1 European beefsteak. Now, do you remember a few years ago when there was a big argument between America and the Europeans, where the Europeans were saying, keep your beef at home. We have our own. We don't need your exports. And there was a furor of arguments, and a lot of research came out to support why the Europeans were hesitant at taking American beef. And I hope to show you that here on this slide, because yeah, if the woman has 9 units and she takes a European beefsteak, she goes up to 13 units, and yeah, that's cancer causing. But look what happens if she gets an American beefsteak. 20. I mean, she just tripled the amount of estradiol in her body. You think she can resist cancer at that point? Hard to do so. And how about skim milk? You know, they give those cows in America lots of hormones, Prosolac. I mean, they give them hormones that will make them, produce more milk. Better living through chemistry, but you drink that milk. Why do they give, all these cattle hormones? Well, for the beef cows, they can get 20% more beef on the same amount of feed. It's sort of an economic choice pushed on them by industry. But you eat that food, you get those hormones, and you can gain 20% more weight on the same amount of feed too. And then there's eggs, and it's 13. Wow, okay. Why do eggs have so many hormones? Well, they are filled with hormones to make a little chick grow. But I was practicing in one of the states in the United States that's known for its animal products. In my town was a hog slaughter plant that slaughtered 14,000 hogs a day. And I would get patients from that hog slaughter plant, and they'd have injuries. And one day such a patient came in to me, and I said, "Which part of the building do you work in? What's your job?" Because I needed to know his physical demands. How do you do this? And he says, "I work in rendering." That took me back, because I knew, my secretary's husband was a HR director at a rendering plant down the road, and where they took dead animals off the road and dead farm animals and processed them and made them into cosmetics and animal feed and so forth. But imagine spreading a skunk on your face, but that happens. Anyway, so I was very curious. I says, "I thought you got all your animals alive. Why do you need rendering?" He says, "Well, you can't make the entire pig into a pork chop." I said, "Well, yeah, that's true. So what part of the pig do you get in your rendering department?" He says, we get the guts, we get the brains, and we get the blood." Well, 14,000 hogs, that's a lot of blood. And so I'm thinking, wow, so what do you do with the blood? He says, "Oh, we sell it to a chicken farmer down the road." I said, "Chicken farmer?" Down the road was a chicken farmer that had 6 big barns of chickens. We're talking big barns, 1.5 million chickens per barn. But I'm still sort of naive, and I'm saying, "Well, why does he want chicken blood?" He says, "Well, helps him lay really good eggs." And at that point, I'm thinking, is the egg going to be a chicken egg or a hog egg? Well, it's going to be loaded with hog hormones, thus these commercial eggs. You got to know where your eggs are coming from. I mean, not just the chicken, what they fed the chicken. And so the estradiol levels go off the charts, and the people get cancer, and they wonder, why me? And it has to do with all these hormones. Now, you can counteract this. You can get good stuff from vegetable sources. Notice here we have phytoestrogens from soy. Here's the way it works. When a young lady is wanting to mature sexually, and she's getting all these hormones, the estradiol comes and plugs into a receptor on the breast, for example. And when it does this, it shifts the gears and gets the thing in action, and she grows breasts. Well, but in the case of soy, it comes along. It sort of looks like estradiol, but it isn't estradiol. It comes and plugs into the gear shift and says, "Nobody's shifting this thing. Nobody can touch it. Hands off. I've got it, and it's not moving." And so it blocks. It's an estrogen receptor blocker, not an estrogen receptor stimulator. Same is true of flax. But I've heard soy was really bad and makes little boys into little girls, and soy has a certain amount of phytoestrogens. Flax has 50% more. You ever hear anything bad about flax? No. Why not? Because they don't make milk out of it. A milk that threatens the livelihood of another very vocal industry. And so don't get taken by that one. And turmeric also. And whoever heard them bad-mouthing turmeric because of this fact. And so this is very important to eat good food, and it will actually be protective. I was at an international congress on vegetarianism. They had speakers from around the world. I was sitting beside a editor for a major European medical journal, and up front was more of these type of guys that were big names that everybody would know. And they had a panel, and they asked the panel of experts, they says, what do you think about soy and breast cancer? They said, all our evidence from good studies show it decreases breast cancer. Somebody else raised their hand. How about if you're already on tamoxifen, would you take soy? They say the research hasn't answered that question yet. And so you definitely want good food to help counteract these toxins. Other things that are helpful are cabbage and everything from that family. Broccoli, we call it cruciferous vegetables. And they significantly increase the elimination through the urine of estrogens. And so, okay, let's just put this in perspective. Go ahead and eat those 2 eggs for breakfast, and then for lunch eat 2 heads of cabbage. Well, I don't know if you need 2 heads of cabbage, but you get the idea. Or just skip the eggs and eat the cabbage. And there's other things that will help with your hormones. Those of you who might be going through menopause and getting hot flash, you'll have a lot of clues here how to balance your hormones. And this is a big one, exercise. It improves your risk of cancer because it helps to reduce serum estradiol. And so, yeah, go ahead and eat those 2 eggs and go run a couple miles, huh? Well, or just run a couple miles. And so this is a very serious business. And if you're fit, if you've been doing this a while, fit people survive cancer much better. Notice that we have a great reduction in the death rate from cancer by 55%. If you're fit, means, yeah, you can run a couple miles or, swim or bike or get your heart up fast, and you do it regularly. Now, so we've talked so far about how protein in meat is a cause of the cancer. We've talked about how fat in meat can cause a cancer, and it's related to hormones. Now we've talked about some things that help, but now I want to get into another factor why meat can be a source of cancer. I've alluded to it here already, but when I was a medical student, they used to stand us all up, and they'd bring in a patient and put him in a chair. And when they put the patient in the chair, they'd call on one of us and they'd say, come over here and look at this patient in front of all your colleagues, and then you're on the spot. They didn't say that, but you're on the spot. And tell us what you think they have. And so one day they brought in a patient and I said, okay, Dr. Clark, you're up. And so I came over and they rolled up the patient's pant leg so that we could see their whole front of the leg. And on the front of their leg was this raised purple area about the size of my small finger and sort of long like that. And I'm looking at that, and they're looking at me, and I said, well, is it Kaposi's sarcoma? And the teaching physician said, well, yes, that's exactly right. Thank you. And why do you think they have Kaposi's sarcoma? Well, the number one reason would be having AIDS or an HIV infection, and that's not a very great diagnosis to be talking about in a group of people. But anyway, I said, well, is the patient HIV positive? And the attending physician said, no, but that would be the number one reason why. But this patient has actually had a kidney transplant, and they are on immunosuppressive drugs. And that's why they have Kaposi's sarcoma. I thought, wow, it's kind of like an epiphany for me. You mean anything that wipes out your immune system could leave you open to cancer? And it just so happens that it's a virus that causes the Kaposi's sarcoma, besides usually having a virus that wipes out the immune system. So it's a virus. And these cancers are often from viruses. And if you wipe out the immune system, viruses can take over. And people who work in meatpacking plants show evidence of having come in contact with all kinds of viruses in their blood. Just these guys that work behind the counter in your local supermarket cutting meat. They take the big chunk of meat, they run it through a saw, the saw gets the blood in the air, they breathe it in, they get more lung cancer, they get more leukemia, which is blood cancer, they get more lymphoma, which is cancer of the lymph nodes. And all because the life is in the blood, or maybe we should say the death is in the blood. The viruses are in the blood, and these people get more cancer. I mean, just to illustrate this, in California they did a study where they took breast cancer samples and they studied them, and they took samples of breast tissue from women that didn't have cancer, and the women who had cancer had 3 times the incidence of infection with a virus that came only from cows. Bovine, meaning cow, leukemia virus. And so, does it make any sense that you drink the product from another species' breast and you get a breast disease? Yeah, it crosses species and you get this kind of trouble. And what else will wipe out my immune system so I'll get the cancer? How about sugar? Oh yes, sugar wipes out the immune system. Here we have all the cancers that increase dramatically as you increase the sugar. Breast, prostate, ovarian, colorectal, gastric, melanoma. What is melanoma? That's skin cancer. I thought skin cancer was from being in the sun too much. You know, if you get melanoma and you hide from the sun, your cancer will be worse than if you went out and got sun. There's 3 things that are very big at causing melanoma. Too much sugar, too much oxidized cholesterol, too much fat in the diet. Those top the list. I mean, there's some other things too. You don't want to burn out there in the sun, but and so high sugar. But maybe you think, I don't eat sugar. Well, let me just say, just because you don't eat sugar doesn't mean you're not in trouble, because a lot of people are eating refined carbohydrates, white bread, white pasta, white rice, and when they eat that, it's the same as eating sugar. It's got, it will make your blood sugar go up almost as high and as fast as pure sugar. Like at the top, I have a bowl of cornflakes and milk, has a glycemic index of 93, meaning it makes your blood sugar go up 93% as high and as fast as pure sugar. That will give you cancer too. Consumption of refined cereals, refined carbohydrates, doubles the risk of, for example, thyroid cancer. And so you want to eat whole plant foods. They have all the nutrients. They don't just give you free carbohydrate that turns into sugar in your bloodstream instantly. Drinking stuff is not helpful. Consumption of carbonated drinks or juice quadruples the risk of stomach cancer. You see, you're getting blood sugar up really high, really fast from these products. Much better to drink a herbal tea if you like something. And now let's get into some of the whys of cancer development. Most of the time, cancer started out as normal cells. But something happened to the cell's program. The program in a cell is its DNA. And so if you eat meat, meat is protein. You usually cook it. When you cook that protein, it changes the protein into something bad called N-nitrosyl compounds, or heterocyclic amines. Amines and nitrogen is the same thing. And so amino acids that make up protein are nitrogen-based acids. And so what it does is it messes with the nitrogen in these products so that they become toxic chemicals. You eat that stuff, it comes to your small intestine, comes to your large intestine, it gets absorbed into the intestine, it goes to the cells lining the intestine, and these compounds change the DNA. Pretty soon you get a cell that grows, it becomes a polyp, becomes a cancer, and then you get a colostomy. And this is sort of the sequence of events. And so you want to make sure you aren't getting this kind of thing. Well, what can I do? Well, eating pineapple helps. Eating pineapple helps inhibit the formation of those N-nitrosyl compounds. They get formed as it's digesting as well as when it's cooking. And so beware of that. Now, here's another factor in meat, and that is how many pesticides and herbicides get into the animal. You know, here we are with an airplane spraying, but probably on the other side of that hedge is all the cattle, and there's blow over to them, and then whatever they sprayed the spray on will probably be fed to the cattle, and so you have all these fancy chemicals, and a lot of these chemicals have hormonal activity or hormone disrupting activity. That's the way they kill bugs sometimes, and well, so you want to avoid pesticides and herbicides for sure. Pesticides and herbicides definitely are on the list to cause cancer, and I'll show you a picture of the cancer caused by herbicides here in a little bit. But let me ask you a question. If I went to the supermarket and I was looking over all the food and I was trying to think in my mind which food would have the least amount of these hormones and which food would have the most hormones, which food do you think would have the most herbicides, for example? I ask that question to audiences and I get strawberries, broccoli. No. Beef is the most dangerous food you can buy for herbicide contamination. How many heads of broccoli does it take to make a pound of beef? I mean, they're chewing on this stuff, and it's like, yeah, they concentrate it. How much do they concentrate it? I don't know, but they did study sea lions off the coast of California, and if they had contaminated fish, anything that was in the fish that was dangerous was concentrated 240 times in the sea lion. So yeah, beef is the most contaminated for herbicides, and third for insecticides, and those cause cancer. On the other hand, I keep coming back to vegetable solutions. Do you see that? Cruciferous vegetables. That's the broccoli, kale, cauliflower, kohlrabi, Brussels sprouts kind of thing. Cruciferous vegetables reduce the damage to your DNA because they keep the toxins from binding to the DNA. How's that for high tech? How's that for all the way down at the molecular level? And it stops the toxins by also cleansing them through your liver. Your liver is the filter. The liver needs to be cleansed. If you're having liver trouble, eat more of these things for sure. And so we've talked about meat and its impact on the increase of cancer through its protein, its fat, its hormones, these viruses that cross species, and toxins such as herbicides and pesticides. Now I want to get back to this DNA thing because God hasn't left you in the lurch. He made provision for some of this stuff. Your DNA is always being read by DNA reading mechanisms. Try to fit that into evolution. Where'd those things come from? And so as the DNA is being surveyed by these correcting mechanisms, it finds damage. When it finds damage, it corrects it. It fixes it. It straightens out the DNA. It's like housekeeping. It's like mopping your floor and vacuum cleaning. It's just a regular ongoing thing. But here's the thing. Whereas God, on one hand, put this in your body to save you from getting cancer. And incidentally, everybody here has some cancer in them, some messed up DNA. But you have some good DNA reading, proofreading mechanisms in place, and it's getting corrected. And as long as your body's healthy and it keeps correcting it, no worries. You just don't want to get behind on it. What would make you get behind on it? Drinking caffeine. What does caffeine do? Caffeine increases your risk of cancer by stopping the DNA damage repair process. I mean, there's a lot of cancers that increase when you use caffeine. Cancer of the breast, colon, stomach, kidney, lung, ovaries. It's because it's taking what God put in place to fix you and binding it up so it can't fix you. There's other sources of caffeine, and caffeine's from a family of chemicals called methyl xanthines, and so theobromine from chocolate. And there's caffeine in chocolate too. 1/2 ounce of chocolate per day. Who stops at 1/2 ounce? Doubles the risk of prostate cancer. And if it doubles the risk of prostate cancer, what do you think it's doing to breast cancer? You got it. Now I want to throw in a slide that just blows the mind. It was a researcher that researched at the NIH for 25 years. It's a slide that is her years of collecting data and watching what's going on. And in the end, she put up this data that's very good facts that shows that yes, whereas in 1900 there's only 5% of the population that had some cancer, that today it's gone up to 33% in women and 50% in men. What's the difference that she identifies? Wonder drugs and vaccines. Because in 1900 we didn't have wonder drugs and vaccines to speak of. I mean, there was some vaccines around, but they were nothing like today. And so all these new inventions from the pharmaceutical industry, you know, it's part of the problem. I mean, just look what's going on. And so we could sit here and give you a list of drugs and what cancers they cause, but there's an awful lot of drugs and an awful lot of cancers. So what do I do to, I have DNA that needs fixed. How do I stimulate it instead of, taking caffeine and stopping it? Well, there's food that will boost your immune system and help you to repair DNA. For example, kiwi. Kiwi is very high in vitamin C. Kiwi is high in phytochemicals that will make your body work harder to protect you by repairing DNA. And so you think Adam and Eve ate a few kiwi? Maybe. Who knows what the history is on that. Now, when if you're working hard and your boss sees you're working hard, and and the boss says, well, I should give him a raise. He's a good worker. And so he gives you this magnificent raise, and you're like, more money? Well, what do I do with more money? And you talk to the wife. She says, I've always wanted a bigger kitchen. Okay, there goes the money. And so you expand the kitchen. So more resources, more expansion. What if I eat extra food? Your body does the same thing. Let's expand. Puts out hormones. But that expansion can often be cancer. And overeating doubles your risk of cancer. You don't want expansion like that. And so don't do that. It's much better to do what we call caloric restrict. Notice he's eating high calorie food. Is she eating high calorie food? No. And when you eat lower calorie food, we call it caloric restriction. Doesn't mean you have to eat less volume, just means you have to eat less calories. Caloric restriction. And when you eat fewer calories, it enhances DNA repair. It reduces DNA damage by being so antioxidant. The people who have shown us the most about this are the Okinawans. The Okinawans eat 40% fewer calories. That's good caloric restriction. And they get 80% fewer breast and prostate cancers and 50% fewer ovarian and colon cancers. Amazing, huh? Well, what's another way I can caloric restrict? I can eat food that has less calories in my meals. It's also very helpful to eat fewer meals. But my doctor said I should eat 8 meals all day long for my reflux disease or my diabetes or my whatever. Well, is that a good idea? Well, let's look at the science. Don't just ask me. Let's look at what the researchers said. When they looked at it, compared to 2-meal-a-day program, 3 meals a day increase your risk of colon cancer by 70%, 4 meals by 90%. What's more, each additional snack time increases your risk of colon cancer another 60%. What's going to happen if I ate 8 little tiny meals all day long? Well, you do the math. For 4 meals, it's 90%. For the other 4 meals, it's 240%. So 90 and 2. I mean, so if you're doing that, you better have an oncologist for your next doctor. Well, so I said fresh fruits and vegetables are going to be lower caloric. They're also nutrient dense. Not caloric dense, nutrient dense. And so fresh fruit and vegetables invigorate your immune system. They help you fight cancer. They're definitely a part of the solution. Wow. Can somebody really live on fresh fruits and vegetables? Very well, and they get healthy. People who do this are better athletes. People who do this lower the risk of Alzheimer's. Oh, does everybody here remember what Alzheimer's was? Oh yeah, that disease where you forget, huh? And the studies show that the more of this you eat, the better. Fresh fruits and vegetables, how many grams per day? You get up around 500 grams per day, or half a pound, and your risk of cancer just keeps dropping and dropping. This is what you want. Well, what kind of diet's that? Isn't that the original diet? Isn't this the diet from Eden? Genesis 1:29 and 3:18. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food, and you'll eat the plants of the field. Notice it didn't say Snickers bars. Notice it didn't say cornflakes. It said the plants of the field. And so you eat good food, and you get good health. How about where I live? I want to talk about cancer and environment. They took a bunch of rats and they gave them cancer. I know, that's mean to the rats. But they took a bunch of rats, they gave them cancer, they put half of them indoors for their life and the other half got to live outdoors. Guess which rat's cancer grew the fastest? You got it, the indoor rats. Twice as fast, twice as big in the same amount of time. Living indoors makes cancer grow. Why? Well, there's toxins in the carpet, and there's no fresh air, and there's, radiation from your cell phone and your Wi-Fi, and there's the screaming kids and the, angry wife or whatever. Stresses. And so getting outdoors, that's our ecological niche. God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and that's where He placed the man whom He had formed, according to Genesis. And so we do the best out there, and we have the least cancer. But we get into modern age, and we have to dress up like modern people for modern reasons. And we put on things like compressive straps around the middle of us, and it causes a decrease in lymph flow. And women who do not wear bras have half the risk of breast cancer compared to bra users. Perfect health depends on perfect circulation, and this device does not help perfect circulation. Now, when you're out there and you're in the fresh air and you're getting away from the house, there's also the benefit of the sunlight. Yes, vitamin D is good too. And so sunlight stimulates your immune system. It helps your antioxidant levels to go up. It makes your blood flow more perfectly. It's definitely very good for decreasing cancer. Back a couple generations ago, when there was some natural doctors that saw the importance of sun, they used to have sanitariums that the main intervention was massive amounts of sun. It's like the sanitarium looked like a greenhouse. People lived in it. Anytime they're outdoors, they were in sort of skimpy clothing, getting lots of sun, like these folks. And they cured cancer, they cured tuberculosis, they cured all kinds of things just with sunlight. And so countries with low sunlight have a much higher incidence of cancer of the breast, colon, rectum, lung, esophagus, oral cancer, cancer of the ovary, pancreas, skin cancer, stomach cancer. Wait a minute, back up. Did you say low sunlight and they have more skin cancer? I did. Okay, moving on. And stomach cancer and higher death rates compared to sunny countries. And then there's the fact that people can't just be outdoors when it's sunny. They think they have to turn on a light and light up the whole world like as if it was still daytime. This messes with what we call your circadian rhythms. This messes with your pineal gland. This decreases your cancer-preventing melatonin. This makes it so that you're more likely to get cancer because you're unprotected. And your cortisol and melatonin are all messed up in the circadian rhythms. This is a big one. How about being on my cell phone all the way up to bedtime and even waking up in the middle of the night to see who texts me? Cancer. What about being on the TV all the way until I go to bed and I fall asleep with the thing still running? Cancer. What about if I have all these LED and especially CFL fluorescent lights that have very blue spectrum light? Cancer. Well, what do I do about it? Well, it's better to have very low red colored light at night and not very bright, and to get to bed early, like 9 or 9:30, and do it every night at the same time so you reset your circadian rhythm to be perfect, and that'll give you better melatonin. Now let's talk about environmental in terms of biological hazards. We could put a big biological hazard sign on this building. If your house got a roof leak, if your house got mold in it, if your house got flooded in a big flood, then you can be sure there's mold in there, and mold is a trigger for cancer. Happened to my mom. Roof leaked, wall filled with mold. Pretty soon she's getting a hysterectomy for uterine cancer. It was a stressful time in the whole family's life, but due to mold, then we had to remodel that part of the house, tear that wall out, fix that roof, and put in a device to keep the area dry and clean. And so mold exposure. But you're saying, my house is new, it's perfect, I don't have any mold in it, so you can move on and just get off this topic. You're sort of spending a lot of time on it. A lot of people don't realize, though, that the mold is not in their house, it's not in their environment, it's in their food. Because they're eating fermented things, alcoholic beverages, vinegar, cheese, sour cream, yogurt, soy sauce. Soy sauce, you know, I'll get to this here. Soy sauce is a big part of the problem. Sauerkraut, salami, chocolate, vanilla, brown rice syrup, nutritional yeast is the mold. But here's the thing. Fermented soy products like soy sauce compared to non-fermented soy products like tofu, the fermented ones increase your risk of cancer by 58%. You weren't made to run on rotten food. Rotten food has lost its antioxidants. Something else is eaten on the food before you get to eat it. That's not sanitary. And so fermented foods are not a part of the solution, they're part of the problem. Another factor in the environment that will increase your risk of cancer is all these modern chemicals. We live in a day when everything's chemical. Everything, you go to the supermarket. What do you buy your peanut butter in? Plastic jar. What do I buy my milk in? Plastic jug. What do I get my juice in? Plastic jug. What do I get my cereal in? Plastic bag. What do I get my, meat in? It's on a card with a plastic front on it, plastic wrapping. Everything's in plastic. And the people who work in those plastic factories making those plastics for you have 5 times the risk of cancer. Bad cancers. Cancers of the pancreas, cancers of the liver, and yeah, boy, back to wrapping the meat in, butcher paper maybe, huh? But don't buy the meat. And the other thing out there is that they're modifying our food. They didn't ask us. Who said you could feed me that? And GMO. I'm talking GMO here. Genetically modified foods. So the French decided to study this. I don't know how they got away with this. Anybody else that studies this loses their job. Well, so they studied it. They just about lost their job, got their paper pulled. But when they looked at it, if they were feeding mice 10% or 11% of their diet as genetically modified corn, not 100%, only 10%. Look at the rats, tumors all over them. And so this genetically modified stuff was very disastrous to animals. Are you an animal? Probably don't want to eat this stuff. It's not going to be good. Now, how do I get rid of toxins out of my body? You definitely want to be getting rid of toxins out of your body. One way is to drink lots of water, exercise, get in the warm sauna, sweat out the toxins, get rid of the stuff out of you, make sure that you don't have it in you all the time, make sure that you are getting healthy, and this is a good part. People don't like to sweat these days. No, it doesn't look good. Wouldn't want to smell like a man. And so, but it's very healthy to sweat out toxins. Otherwise, they're going to have to be removed by your lungs. They're going to have to be removed by your kidneys. They're going to have to be removed by your liver, and you can get cancer of those organs because the toxins aren't being removed by your skin. Now, a lot of people love to communicate. It's good to communicate. They like to do it on their modern devices, but those modern devices, study after study, have shown they cause cancer. What do? They mess with your blood-brain barrier. They mess with your calcium channels. They mess with your whole metabolics. And so cancers in your brain and ear can occur with radiation from your mobile phone. What about 5G? A lot of suspicions that it's even worse. But and it isn't limited to your cell phone. It can be your Wi-Fi, living near a cell phone tower, having a smart meter on your house. For us, our car was high EMF. We got a meter to check it. And our car was just off the charts, high EMF. Whenever we got in the car, it was kind of like having a microwave treatment. But people in front of televisions have more cancer, probably due to the stress of what's going on that TV, but also it can be due to the fact that your metabolism goes way down, your brain activity goes way down, and your immune system is controlled, stimulated, regulated by your brain. So for every hour you spend in front of the television, more than one study, your risk of cancer goes up by 9%. So if you're 5 hours in front of the TV, that's a 45% increase in cancer. Okay, we've talked about a lot of lifestyle factors that will increase cancer. We've talked about the impact of environmental things that will increase cancer, dietary things, the impact of meat. All these things will cause cancer. But let's say we have two people that are equally exposed to all those things. They're not trying to avoid it. They're using them all the time. And but one family has fights every night. They don't get along. They have interpersonal relationship problems. Guess what? That family has a 40% higher risk of cancer than the other family with the same other cancer risks. That's amazing, 40% higher. And you know, peace of mind makes the body healthy, but jealousy is like a cancer, says Proverbs 14:30. So what do I do if I'm all stressed out and I can't get along with anybody and life seems to be the pits? Well, there's help. And they find that people with good spiritual health have found peace in God, have better life expectancy, decreased anxiety, less depression. Their immune system is boosted so they can fight cancer. Let God help you with this cancer. You know, it's stress release. Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And that's what we need, the true rest of leaving all that stress with God. And people who have that sense of rest are often more grateful. Studies of gratitude and its impact on survival of breast cancer showed that people who, even before they got their breast cancer, had a life of gratitude. They loved to be grateful. They, appreciated things, especially the gifts that God had given them, had a much better survival rate than those who didn't. I mean, the opposite of gratitude is really bitterness, isn't it? And there's other things that are helpful. One is getting involved in helping others. You get out of yourself. One of my observations when I was medical director at our sanitarium and we had a lot of cancer patients was, compared to my diabetic patients, compared to my other patients, these cancer patients were stressed out. And I don't think it happened because they got cancer. It predated that. And so we started a stress management workshop for them. They really appreciated that. And they thought that was the best part of the program, at least some of them. And but here's the thing. You need to get out of yourself. Quit stressing out about yourself. Start doing things for other people. When you do things for other people, it benefits you. Being helpful and supportive to your friends, neighbors, relatives, spouse significantly improves your survival odds. Just receiving support really doesn't improve your survival odds. It's more blessed to give than to receive. And another thing that's helpful is looking forward to a happy future. I think of Revelation 21:1-4, and I saw new heavens and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And God shall wipe away all tears, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. And so we want to do it well. We want to make sure we stay healthy. We want to avoid cancer, take advantage of all the benefits of foods as grown. and avoid animal products that are high in protein, fat, viruses, toxins, and growth hormones. Avoid foods and substances that damage DNA and suppress the immune system, like sugar, animal products, tobacco, alcohol, caffeine, heavy metals, pesticides. Choose a lifestyle and diet which expels toxins from your body, invigorates your immune system, keeps you at peak physical, mental, and spiritual performance. Exercise in the open air and sunshine. Get plenty of water. Rest in bed at night and in the love of God and His providence. So here's our website if you want to download a handout that goes over all this stuff in written form. Under presentation handouts, a button on the left-hand side, you can find that kind of material, or you can actually download my book or order it from the website. So this has been another presentation, Cancer is Our Hope, in the series Blueprint for Health and Healing, Reversing Disease from Its Foundation.